Just before we jump into this thing real quick, I love this Synergy dynamic and us getting ready to launch Synergy, which is this collection of groups of people meeting in unique places, oftentimes in people's homes, for the sake of reaching more people at a faster rate. Joel's right. We want to be a sending place. And when people are moving for the sake of furthering the mission, we're going to send even when it's painful. And even this morning, got to have a very brief conversation with part of a family who they've been exploring the Synergy thing and just recently kind of just sensed, man, this is what God is inviting us into. So it's like another family we're going to send here coming up shortly. And I love it. And I want to remind us in it, because I experienced all the things in that moment, in that conversation, every time, that's a little bit painful, a little bit of grief, and a lot of celebration. A little bit painful, a little bit of grief, a lot of celebration. Let's not act like it's not painful or grief. We're sending people, and it will change relationship rhythms and everything else. But for the sake of Jesus doing what Jesus did, Jesus was a sender and is a sender, and so we are senders. That's what we're doing. Whether it's Miranda and David with some kingdom dreams swirling in them and opportunity in front of them, or whether it's people here locally in our region for Synergy, I absolutely love it. So I'm glad that we get to be a part of that together. For those of you joining online, I need to have a 30-second conversation with people in the room. People in the room, I'm not exactly sure what happened today, but more of you are seated in places you don't normally sit than I've ever seen before in one day, okay? What I want to say is, maybe there's a moment where it's slightly unnerving. There's more moments where I'm like, look at you people, on the leading edge of change, okay? So I just want to dare and challenge all of you next week, sit someplace you have never taken a seat in here before, and let's just see if we can really rock the boat, okay? So for those of you that were starters in that, that's great. For those of you seated on vacation or in a dorm room or at home somewhere, there's a seat for you in this room. See you next week. We're glad that you're joining online, but we'd love to have you in a room too. Love to have you be here. We started this series of conversations last week, and when I say series of conversations, I mean that. I hope that when we leave here on a Sunday and we go into a week, we continue to have conversations both with Jesus and the people around us around what it is he's doing in us and inviting us into collectively, regardless of the theme. And we started this series of conversations last week around this idea of family and trying to say, okay, wherever we're at in family, whether we're a grandparent, a parent, a sibling, a kid, an aunt, an uncle, a husband, a wife, a fiance, somebody dating, whatever that is, wherever we're at inside that dynamic of family, what is it that maybe Jesus would be still building in us? There's no arrival points. There's no I got to the end and now Jesus doesn't do anything in my life anymore. In every season, in every period of life, in every year of life, Jesus is up to something good, continuing to reveal more of himself in us. And so he said, what does it look like to just say, hey, what's the vision? In this season of life, what's the vision that God would give me for family? What's my spirit-given revelation? What would the Holy Spirit be revealing to me about himself that would shape how we live, or maybe how I live my part in whatever family season I'm in this moment? And today, last week, I think it's fun to talk about dreams and let's get a vision. I think it's fun. I could talk about it all day long, 365. I love that part. Today, we're going to talk about something that maybe not feel like as much fun, but I believe might actually be more helpful. But we had to start with the revelation piece, because if we don't really get a revelation of where we're going, the rest of the things that we're going to talk about, they never really get full traction. So when we talk specifically just about parenting, we want to parent from the place of what's the vision. When we talk about money, because it's one of the leading disruptors and destroyers of family still today, we want to talk, what's our God-given revelation? That'll influence how we think about money. When we talk about pace and how we spend our time and where our time goes and how we keep up with a calendar, we want to answer that from a place of vision and revelation first. So we had to start there. And today, I want to talk about something that all of us have experienced, all of us know it, all of us maybe live with some element of it all the time. Some of us kind of live with a low-grade infection of this. There's just always a strand of it in our problem, and it's not knocking us all the way down, but it's kind of there and a little bit annoying, and we adjust to it. For others of us, we're not living in it now, but we've had moments where it's big and it's explosive, and it could be big again. And it's just this common experience, common to all of humanity, including in the context family, of conflict. This reality that whatever family dynamic you're in, sometimes there's conflict and there's disagreement. And it can be for really small, dumb reasons, right? Like it could be siblings in the backseat of a car with one of them very, very upset because their sibling looked across the car and out their window. Okay, right? It can get that crazy, right? I own this window because it's my side of the car today, right? It can be that crazy. When Eric and I were first married, I had been in New York for a year, and when we got married in Michigan, and then her family was helping us move out, we were going to move from this apartment that I lived in, which was on the top of an old 1800s mansion. We were going to move in and rent a house from somebody, and when we got there, the house we were going to move into wasn't quite ready, and so me and Erica and her family, we were all kind of packed in to this little upstairs apartment thing for a little bit, and it was crowded. It wasn't ideal. We were just trying to get there. Erica doesn't really know anybody there yet. I've lived there for a year, so I know some people. And it's like, okay, how are we doing this? And it starts to drag out just a little bit. And on one particular day with her family still there, things got tense. And in a heated moment, and some great frustration, I'm not sure why this was my word choice, but I looked at Erica and I said, "Don't be such a pansy." Okay? Now, I don't know, right? Well, it didn't go over very well. And her very mature response to my very immature temporary labeling was to go in the bedroom and lock the door and not come out. And so in this moment, we've got two clearly of the more mature people on the face of the earth in the moment, in this great dispute, right? And it's really over just this ridiculous thing, right? It's a tense time and things aren't working like we thought they would, but I don't know where the word pansy came from and why that was the word. I don't know why she thought locking the door was going to solve it, right? But in the moment, that's the condition we were in, right? Now, you'll be glad to know we solved that one, okay? 26 years later, we solved it. But we're both fairly intense people. And so we have different wirings, but we both carry a fairly significant level of intensity and forward movement and bias towards action. And when both of us are like that, that can lead to some tense moments. And so we've still had disagreements since then. Some of you might be in a relationship right now where there's a big disagreement, or you might be, again, in one where there's just this low-level disagreement. There's this low-level tension in your family because somebody won't make the adjustment everybody else knows they need to make, and you're not really sure how to deal with it. You're coping with it. But if you were honest, what you're really living in is just unresolved conflict. It is a conflict. It's not resolved, and we've just adjusted the way to live in it. Now, we could talk about how we're going to solve these things. How are we going to solve them? And we will. But first, we can say, where in the world did these even come from? Why is conflict even on the table? And I wanted to show you a couple of lines from a guy named James, who's actually the half-brother of Jesus. And in chapter 4 of this letter of James, he plays this out for us a little bit. And this is what he says. He says, "What causes fights and quarrels among you?" Super practical, on the table. Here it is. "Do they not come from your desires, these things that battle within you? You desire, but you don't actually have all the things you desire. You covet," right? You covet. You desire, but you don't have, so you kill. And you covet, but you can't get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. James just distills it all down. James, growing up around even Jesus, he just said, look, if you really want to know what causes all the conflicts, if you really want to know why you fight, if you really want to know why that conflict isn't resolved, if you really want to know why you said pansy and you locked a door, at the end of the day, it's because of desires. We often have desires that maybe are competing with each other, or maybe are competing with the way life is going, which then translates into some tension with the people around us. And listen, the easiest people, right? The easiest people to quarrel and fight with are the people we live with the most and trust the most, right? Because we just trust they'll always be there. Right? It can sometimes feel like there's a little less at risk. We have these competing desires. And just so you know, this is also true in our relationship with Jesus. What really separates us from Jesus is our desires. We're born with selfish desires that cause us to live in a way that the Bible describes multiple times as going our own way, or living out our own desires, or pursuing our own agenda with a lack of trust or appreciation for who Jesus is. Like the thing that would separate us from Jesus is sin, and sin is shaped by a desire that competes with Jesus' pure and like loving and purely motivated desire. And Jesus remedies that. I mean, we read from the passage earlier in Colossians during our worship through music piece that it's God's great pleasure to reconcile that for us. And if you're separated with Jesus, it is at the end of the day because of these competing desires that lead us to this place of where we sin. We live independent of Jesus, and Jesus says, man, let me forgive all that. Let me lead your life. Let me save you from that, lead you. And over time, I'll just help your desires like come in line with mine. I'll give you my desires. I'll help my desires be more and more attractive and appealing and satisfying to you. And that same dynamic ends up translating into our human relationships where we have desires and they compete and we don't get what we want. And when we don't get what we want, what do? We fight. And do we always fight by yelling and using words like pansy? No. Sometimes we fight with the cold shoulder or the silent treatment or the withholding of something or absence of emotion. Right? There's lots of ways that we can fight. There's lots of ways we can navigate conflict. And part of the reason that we fight inside of these desires is because when we're not getting our desires, what is being revealed to us is unmet expectations. Unmet expectations. You and I live with expectations. You and I live with expectations of every relationship. Sometimes spoken, sometimes not. You and I live with expectations of every moment. You came here today with some level of expectations, whether you thought about them consciously or not. You came here today with some level of expectation. You got married with an expectation. You're dating with an expectation. You have expectation of your parents, or parents, you have expectation of your kids or your grandkids or your grown children, right? We have these expectations, and when they are not met, man, it can lead to some tension. And it often leads to the tension because we haven't acknowledged it's an unmet expectation, and we haven't learned how to talk about it. Because we enter family again. Whatever generation you're in, we enter family, and we enter into every season of family with some ways of viewing conflict. Right? Your family of origin is still today in some way shaping how you view conflict, how you view disagreement and unmet expectations. When I married Erica, I married into maybe one of the most diverse, extremely opposite families in the ways they had grown up solving conflict. Erica's dad grew up in an environment where he thought there was no conflict. He grew up and thought, man, nobody ever fights, nobody ever disagrees, this is the best thing ever. Because whenever his parents had a fight, they went into a bedroom and closed the door and they had it out, and they never argued, they never disagreed, anything, not even in the slightest way around their kids. So he grew up with this thing of, man, life is great all the time. And fortunately, he's still a really joyful person, even though reality met him somewhere. Right? He's one of the most joyful people I know, but he grew up in this environment. And then he marries Rita, the woman who will become Erica's mom, and she grew up in the complete opposite. You never held an opinion back. You never let your desires go unknown. You never backed down to anybody in your family. When things weren't what you wanted them to be, you did something about it. And oftentimes in broken, dysfunctional, manipulative ways. And these two people get married, and you should just know that's not an easy bridge to cross. to solve conflict from those two different experiences. And look, somewhere that's shaping you. If you've never really thought about it, it's shaping you far more than you know. And you can be like, yeah, but John, like, no, man, I love Jesus, and he's transformed my life, and he's cleaned me. I was like, that's great. I love this quote from Pete Scazzaro, who says, man, Jesus may be in your heart, but grandpa's in your bones. You did inherit some traditions and some ways and some tendencies. Even if you didn't see them, you inherited some generational tendencies and ways, some patterns of thinking, even some leanings towards certain sins, right? And so we have these like desires, and these desires like highlight for us unmet expectations where somebody's not meeting all my needs, somebody's not meeting my communication needs or my love needs or my affection needs or my material needs. Somebody's not meeting all my needs. Somebody's not giving me the time I deserve. Somebody's not giving me the space I deserve or I think I want. We have these unmet expectations, and we solve them. We start trying to solve all of that more than we know by family of origin, which just tends to create more conflict. It tends to actually spin the wheel faster and harder. It doesn't break any cycles. It deepens the tracks in our life and in our brain and our soul of how we're going to try and solve it. So the question becomes fairly so, right? So what do we do with that? If there is conflict and it's real and it's inside of any, again, small or big, it's in any moment of family, what are we going to do with that? And I really want to say, it's in any moment of family. Even as when I was a teenager, and my grandparents were hugely influential in my life, and I've talked about that a lot, but when I was a teenager and my life was stretching out a little bit, I was getting a little more freedom or whatever, the natural course of life was I spent a little less time at their house. And that led to like some disappointment on their part, fairly so, I get it, right? And that led to like some unmet expectations on their part because we never really had a conversation, which is kind of the course of life. And right, it led to this low-level conflict with the people that I loved as much as anybody else in my world and who loved me more than anybody else in their world. So even in the best of circumstances, conflict can happen because you and I have desires, which can often lead to unmet expectations. So how is it we actually go after these and actually say, okay, how can we get through conflict? How can we navigate it and not just keep repeating the cycle and get beat by the cycle? What can I actually do? Let me just give you a few things. First one is we've always got to be learning language. We've always got to be language learning, always. Just always. It's moving. It's a growth process. It's ongoing time. Everybody in your life, including your family, has certain ways they communicate and they hear love most easily. It's just most natural to them. Again, we've talked about this a ton over the years. You can find it in tons of our messages, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But there are these 5 primary love languages. And if you just searched it, five love languages, you could take an online test in a blink. And there's these 5 love languages. And there they are on the screen. Like everybody has 1 or 2 ways that it is most natural for them to communicate love and the most natural way for them to receive it. So I tend to be like, words of affirmation person. Erica tends to be gifts. And because that's a foreign language to me, I've had to spend most of our married life learning that. And I'm still learning it. Why do I have to keep learning it? Because it's not native to me. It's not natural to me. If I don't use it frequently, it gets rusty. It's kind of like if you learn a literal foreign language and you don't use it, it gets a little rusty, you can get it back. And so I had to learn that, oh man, like I married this person and their primary love language is gifts. And we're young and married and broke. This is a problem, okay, right? Because for me, gifts, because of my family of origin, like gifts were generally speaking larger things. Okay, I don't know. Like I can give you the entire living room by yourself. Like is that the gift? But I had to learn that. Oh no, that's her love language. But really, it can be something as small as a card, like a 99-cent shoebox card. It's just this thought that you would want to give me something. You would want to bring me something. Right? We have to learn, like this constant learning. Grandparents, have you stopped long enough to say, like, what's your best guess at how your grandkids best hear love? Is it quality time with you? Is it just your words of affirmation and encouragement? Is it small gifts from you? Is it physical touch? Like, how do you think? Like, what is it? Husbands, wives, like, when's the last time you had a conversation about it? Even if you've been married a long time, it's still a conversation Eric and I have. Like, when's the last time you had a conversation about it? Like, hey, today, like in this season of our life, based on the pressure we're under, the stress we have, the dreams we're dreaming, like out of your top couple of love languages, which one's top right now? Hey, moms and dads, like this is major in our parenting. It's major. It influences like how we discipline, like how we regroup after discipline, how we have boundaries, how we deal, like the response to conflict can be shaped by how we understand our kids best hear love. We've got to constantly be learning the language. Young people, which by that I don't mean anybody at the under age of 45, which is young to me, but young people, like people who are still living at home with your parents. Okay? It's really helpful. If you want to have healthy, growing, stretching conversations with your parents, it's really helpful if you want them to trust you more, to learn their love language, speak their language. Speak their language. Like, how do they best hear love? If it's not words of affirmation and the only thing you're doing to try and butter them up is celebrate how good of a parent they are, it may or may not be resonating. If all you're doing is saying it, but their love language is quality time, it's okay, man, take the pressure off and don't talk. Just go do something with them, sit with them, be with them, go where they are, get in the car with them, ask them to do what you're doing. Look, I should have told your parents to be quiet. I'm like giving you free leverage right there, okay? Learn their language. Don't just make them learn yours. You learn theirs. Even my parents who are now in their 70s, like it's still on me to keep learning their language and how best to communicate in each season of life, and I don't always do well at that. Like, okay, like how do we do it? Now, it's helpful to be learning language, but there's another thing, and I want to give you some words that for some of you these can be really familiar. For some of you these are going to be brand new words, and you need to write these down, like to just deeply embrace them, okay? Because this can be the pivot point in every conversation. I see some of you like notebooks up. Now you're ready, okay? This is it. These are the two words that could profoundly change how you solve conflict inside of your relationships, okay? We got to get really good at the practice of saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint you with the lack of profundity in those two words for some of you. But this is game changer, friends. This is game changer. There are a couple ways that we say, I'm sorry. The first one is we really do say, I'm sorry when we cause pain, when we are the one who is wrong. We just say, I'm sorry. If it's the people that we really love, if it's our spouse, kids, grandkids, parents, and we cause pain, we say, I'm sorry. And could I just, let me just go one step further with that. Even when we didn't mean to cause pain, but we did, just say, I'm sorry. Because what we're sorry about is not just the act. We're sorry about the pain caused. We're not just sorry of what we did or what we said. I wasn't just sorry that I used the word pansy. I actually thought I was pretty cute in the moment. But I wasn't just sorry that I used the word pansy. I was sorry for the pain that it caused. Right? It's like we say, I'm sorry, even, the phrase we use around our house all the time is, we are sorry even for accidental pain. We don't want to be careless with that. So we just say, I'm sorry. And then I love the words of Benjamin Franklin. Check this out. He said, man, don't ruin an apology with an excuse. Isn't that the best? I'm really sorry, but don't you know, I'm really sorry, but what I meant to do, I'm really sorry, but you misunderstood. That's always a helpful one, right? I'm really sorry about it. But listen, can I say, we have some barriers here. We have some barriers here. If I could talk to parents again just for a second, we often are like some of the chief people with the barrier because we think we have a pressure to be right. We have a pressure to say, well, the parent should be right. I'm not going to apologize. You apologize. The older we get and the older our kids get, the harder it gets because sometimes our kids have really weird memories of their past. Right? I mean, you feel that with me? Like, sometimes, right? And so we say, no, like, I'm sorry. Hey, let me just go. Like, students, again, let me just help you. I'm going to give you a free gift. Your parents are from outer space sometimes. It's okay. You still say, I'm sorry. I'm telling you, man, it'll go better. Problems will be solved faster. If you say, I'm sorry, now help me. No, what could I have done differently? Or how could we have navigated it differently? Or how can we have the conversation? Like, just I'm sorry. But we bristle against it a little bit. We bristle against it. Let me give you another quote. This has been used by lots of different people. Nobody really knows where this one started with, but it says this: apologizing does not always mean you're wrong and the other person is right. It just means you value your relationship more than your ego. What do you want to protect most in the middle of the conflict? The relationship or your rightness or appearance of brilliance or appearance of being right or your status or your image of your position in the relationship? Oftentimes the biggest barrier is like we are actually protecting, we think we are protecting ourselves instead of fighting for the relationship. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I don't even know if we'll ever fully agree on this issue, but I am sorry I caused you pain. Would you please continue to help me understand how I caused that pain if I don't understand? Let's be language learners together. Like I don't know if I fully get it, but can you help me with that? Look at Proverbs. It says this, and again, a lot of this series we're pulling on things from Proverbs. It said, hatred stirs up conflict. Hatred stirs up or keeps going. It keeps spinning a conflict once it's started. But love covers over all wrongs, which is interesting. A little bit later in the New Testament Bible, a guy named Peter, he wrote that talking about Jesus a little bit and inviting people to live that way. Like love can cover over a multitude of sins. Like that Jesus' death for us is an extreme expression of his love for us. And let's be clear here. Hatred is not always, I hate you. Like, look, most of us are at least somewhat from West Michigan. We don't say things like that very often. Even when we think it, we don't say things like that very often. Sometimes the hatred is more than a hatred towards a person. It's just a hatred of being wrong. It's a hatred of admitting something. It's a hatred of saying, okay, wait a minute, I might have contributed to this conflict. And when we do that, it keeps the conflict stirring. Because listen, when we have a hatred of being wrong, we do apologies in words and not in feel or heart. How many of you ever had like one of those apologies? I'm sorry. And we're like, all of us had to do that as kids at some point. Say you're sorry. I'm sorry. Say it like you mean it. I'm sorry. Okay, like we didn't mean it no matter how many times our parents said, say it like you mean it. All that did was improve acting skills. It didn't do anything else, right? And you know, like when you've been on the receiving end of one of those, right? But why is that? Because it can stir up conflict, right? It keeps the conflict good, keeps the conflict going. Even if the conflict only is still going in our own mind. Even if the conflict is only going, it's still in here. And maybe it's still stirring in our heart. Oh, I apologized. And I've learned that art of apologizing so well that now I can act like everything is okay, but I'm still pretty furious, still pretty disappointed. I'm still upset that my expectations have not been met, and I don't think they're ever going to be met. Like when we will genuinely apologize, we can take the steam out of some of the conflict so we can actually address the conflict. Like what's actually at the root? What's at the core? And I said there's two kinds of apologies. One is just saying, I'm sorry for causing pain, whatever. The other, inside of a conflict, one of the greatest gifts inside a conflict is just empathy. It's just saying, I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm sorry we're at this moment in our relationship. I'm sorry we are in this right now. I'm really sorry. And it's not really, I'm sorry because I did something wrong because I don't know what that is yet. I'm not really sorry because you did anything wrong because I'm not sure what that would be yet. But I am sorry we're here. I love you enough that I hate to see you hurt. I love you enough that I hate to see you hurt. I love you enough that I hate to see you hurt. I love you enough that I hate to see you hurt. And I'm very sorry you're in pain. It's the same phrase we use when we talk to people who have gotten bad news or experienced great loss, right? We say, oh, man, I'm sorry. And for some of us, one of the gifts we could bring to our next conflict is our empathy. To bring it right into the conflict. And in order to do that, one of the things we got to resist at all costs, let's always be learning language and let's practice getting really good at saying I'm sorry. And then let's just have a refusal to be defensive. Let's just have a refusal to be defensive. Defensiveness is the end of every conversation. Talking may keep happening. The conversation ended when somebody got defensive. You might talk for hours more, weeks more, months more. When there is defensiveness, when there is oh, no, you don't, or oh, I'm never going to let that happen, or oh, I'm never going to, right? Defensiveness, that's the end of the conversation. Let me just have a marriage moment. Let's have a marriage moment, okay? Sometimes we are stuck in the same conflict in our marriage for years, or the same issues, round the cycle, in large part because we decided we would get defensive. And we said at all costs, I will protect this, I will protect my right, I will protect my expectation, I will protect my desire at all costs. And we get defensive, and it ends every conversation. Again, you can have lots of words still, lots of them. But sometimes it's just good to just pause and ask, hey, am I just being defensive? Some of us are trying to reconcile relationships with grown children or with our parents as the age or whatever. Just periodically ask, am I being defensive? Am I short-circuiting this process by being defensive at all? Is there anything in there? And then if we kind of get these things moving, right, in the right direction, and the last thing is just to say, man, let's take, James actually talks about this in another pocket in his letter, inside a conflict, let's listen way more than we speak. 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 Which is really hard, right? Especially if you're the hurt one, man. You want to unload and let things out, right? Or if you're the one that was wrong, you're trying to justify, explain, and earn back and pacify, right? You're just trying to make it right. Okay? But just listen. Just listen. This little often unspoken gift inside of conflict is to get really good. Become a master at asking questions. When you just can't get on the same page as your kids, just keep asking exploratory questions, genuinely exploring what's going on in their head, what's going on in their heart, what's going on. And sometimes that isn't 30 minutes of asking questions. It's more like a hit and run series of questions. I'm going to bump into him today with a question. I'm just going to listen. Tomorrow I'll bump into him with another one. Listen. Maybe on a really good day, I'll get 2 questions into my teenager, right? Maybe. Become a really good question asker and just an explorer in person on discovery to understand, okay, what's really inside of this? If it was the problem was me, what pain did I really cause? Where's the wound really lodged? Or what is really, like, let me keep asking questions so I can try and understand why they're doing what they're doing, why they're saying what they're saying. Like, I think conflict should be a competition of who can listen more. What if that was conflict? Like, who can listen more? Again, that's hard in our house. When there's 4 of us, when we're all 4 home, we have 3 really verbal people and 1 not as verbal person. And the 3 really verbal people, sometimes it's game on. Sometimes, you got to like just hold your breath long enough for somebody to pause so you think you can get a word in, right? You got to go. And then because there's 1 nonverbal, the 3 verbal people go to the nonverbal person, and we got 100 questions at the first moment. Okay, and our nonverbal, it's over. My brain doesn't have a capacity for all that right now. But what if we could have a competition? Who's listened more inside this conflict? Who's listened more? And I mean listened. Like actually listened. Look at this verse. I think this is great. Fools find no pleasure in understanding. Anybody who's ever had a middle school kid, can I get a witness? Now, don't laugh too hard because your parents would have said the exact same thing about you. But, right? My parents would have said the exact same thing about me, right? Fools have no pleasure in understanding, but they just delight in their own opinions. I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and I just said to them, they were navigating something, and I said, look, when you talk to this person, listen. And they said back to me, I do listen. I was like, you have a pattern of not listening, which is why you're always in this predicament, right? You're not talking, but not talking doesn't mean listening. Like actually, like absorb and try and soar and, again, become a great explorer, a great person of discovery. Because it's only fools who really enjoy resisting understanding. Come on, let's not be fools. Let's not be fools. Who's the best question asker ever? It's Jesus. Who's the wisest person? Well, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. You kind of want to know the secret behind that? Jesus wasn't like just asking for his own discovery. Was his humanity learning something? Sure. Jesus was asking to also sometimes help people in their own self-discovery. The best chance of really solving a conflict is if we're both discovering, or all 3 of us, or 5 of us, or 10 of us, or whatever it is. Imagine with me, like just for a moment, a palm tree. We don't really have those here, but just imagine with me for a palm tree. And I could have picked a picture of a palm tree like at a resort or something like that's perfect. Like big, tall, like it's just perfect. But I wanted to pick this one because it's got some things that aren't perfect on it. It's got weeds down around it a little bit. It's got some blemishes, right? Which I just feel like that's a little more like us. We're not perfect. We're flawed, that's why we acknowledge we need Jesus, right? And if you look real close at that palm tree, what you'll see is that up on the top, in the middle, there's a brown palm or 2. There's a couple dead ones. And if you called somebody out and said, hey, man, I want to try and get these dead palms out of there, what's going on here? I want this thing to stay green, or I want it to stay green. Like a really good person at navigating all of this, the first thing they do would not be to just climb up and knock off the dead palms. It'd be the easiest thing to do, but you could probably do that. Right? I could probably do that, right? The first thing that they would probably do is say, hey, let's first just make sure we're good. Let's check the soil here. Let's make sure you got enough water. Is the tree actually holding enough water right now? Are the right nutrients in here? Is something shifted in your yard? Is what do we really have? Let's check the soil, because if we get really good soil, this palm tree is going to stay healthy. It might have some storms that hit it. It might occasionally get a little bit sick, and some things might go wrong. But if we get the soil right, it'll be good. It'll be good. And I want to take all this today and just give you 2 ways to check the soil. Just check the soil of where you are in conflict and what might be happening. The first one's really simply this: if you're wrong, apologize and grow. If you survey the conflicts of your life, or you survey the past conflicts, or you survey the low-lying conflict, is there any place that you're wrong? Just apologize and grow. Don't just apologize and grow. Hey, Jesus, what would you shape in me in this? What would you grow in me in this? What would you alter? Like what perspective? What words? What conditions of my heart? What would you teach me about being an explorer? What would you teach me about how I can measure my words differently and not use words like pansy? Like what would you help me with here? But the other side is also true. What if you're wronged? Well, if you're wrong, if you've been wronged, if you have been the one who has been wronged, then forgive and grow. Forgive and grow. Make a choice to forgive and grow. How do I love the one who has hurt me? How can I be a little more Jesus like you and in your power and actually look at the people who crucified you, and while they were doing it, you just said, man, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And then some of your followers did the same thing with people who were killing them. Jesus, I've been wronged, and it does hurt, and it is painful, and I choose to forgive. And please don't let it be wasted. Would you grow me? Would you shape me, and would you mold me? Because listen, if we can get the soil right, if we can live in this posture, then as far as it depends on us, we don't have to live with the same conflicts over and over and over and over and over again. Don't just jump up and chop off the dead branch and then say, okay, we dealt with it, now let's move on. That thing's coming back. Thing's coming back. Go all the way down into the soil. Say, okay, I want to be a language learner. I'm going to just resist defensiveness. I'm going to learn the practice of saying I'm sorry and actually meaning it. I'm going to try and listen more, but to make all of that have a good landing spot in me, I'm going to apologize and grow, and I'm going to forgive and grow. Some of you have an immediate conflict and you're in it. You showed up today not knowing that Jesus designed today for you with some tools to actually walk out with Jesus is an incredibly practical Savior. And he's giving you tools to walk out. If we get the say, okay, this I can do. Some of you, it's for the future as your kids grow or your parents age or whatever, or you're trying to figure out dating. How would we solve a conflict when we have it, right? For some of you, you're in one of those like low-flying, it's constant conflict. Somebody in your family won't make a change. Somebody doesn't seem to be able to heal. And you're one of the many people on the constant really receiving end of that. And you've learned to manage, and you've learned to toughen up, and you've learned to deal with it, and you're doing what you think is the most Jesus-honoring thing. Could I just give you a lot of permission today? It is okay. It is okay in that case to be a person that's forgiving 1,000,000 times over. And if nothing else ever changes and nobody ever responds, Jesus will have so transformed your life, he will refuse to let that be wasted.